If you're a fan of vampire literature and media, then it may not be too far off for me to assume that many of you would certainly like to become a vampire. You get to live forever. You have superhuman strength, speed, you're immune to illness, it's the best of everything, even if you have to consume human blood. I'd become a vampire in a heartbeat, I know that. In my opinion, who wouldn't want to be? Well, believe it or not, there's a couple of individuals who didn't want it, 10 to be exact, and I've compiled those 10 people into a list for you all today. 10 humans who were forced to become vampires against their will. Guys, this list isn't ranked because that wouldn't really make sense, so let's kick it off with number 10, Claudia, Vampire Chronicles. Claudia should have never been made a vampire in the first place, especially, and most importantly, due to the fact she was just 5 years old. Even if she wanted to become a vampire, she could have never made that decision for herself, and in reality, she didn't. Her mortal life was taken from her by Louis when he gave in to his urges and fed on her, before Lestat then took advantage of the situation and turned Claudia into an immortal. Claudia grew to greatly resent both of her fathers as her mind began to break after 60 years in a child's body, while her mind continued to develop. Although she excelled as a vampire, her power was greatly limited, with Claudia expressing it was an existence she never wanted for herself. She wanted to grow into a woman and have her own life. She suffered a brutal death as a result of taking revenge on Lestat for turning her, and even continued to scold Louis from the afterlife years later. Coming in at number 9, we have Michael from The Lost Boys, one of my all-time favourite 80s movies. So Michael had just moved to Santa Carla with his family before he encountered David and the vampire gang at the pier. Now, he initially believed that everything he witnessed was just parlour tricks, and when David brought out the bottle of vampire blood for Michael to drink, he gave in to peer pressure and consumed it, being truly unaware of what the consequences of doing so would bring upon him. Michael then began his transition into a vampire, but rejected it from the very beginning. He went against David's pleas to embrace his vampiric nature and become one of the boys. Michael's refusal to complete this transition meant he would remain a half vampire. He finally reverted back to human form after killing David at the end of the movie. Up next at number 8, we have Damon Salvatore, and unless you're an avid fan of the series, you may not be aware that Damon didn't want to become a vampire. Well, he did originally, but changed his mind after he believed Catherine to be dead. He wanted to refuse the transition and then die. He didn't want a life without the woman he loved. It was actually his brother Stefan who forcefully convinced him to become a vampire when he dangled a woman right in front of him, pushing his brother to consume her blood. After Damon completed the transition and realized that Stefan had coerced him into doing it while he was in such a vulnerable state, Damon then promised to make his brother endure a lifetime of misery in exchange for not allowing him to die. In the long run, Damon actually embraced vampirism, probably more so than any other vampire in the series. Blackhead comes in at number 7 from the movie Priest. Once a devout and highly skilled priest who battled against vampires, he was captured when he invaded their lair along with several other priests. After being fed upon by dozens of vampires from the hive, the queen intervened just before his death and fed him her blood, making Blackhead the first ever human-born vampire. Although we witness his screams and resistance upon being forced to become a vampire, Blackhead fully embraced his new powers and became devoutly loyal to the queen, carrying out her wishes by leading a group of vampires in a pursuit of taking over the city. He even killed his former priest colleagues, such was his loyalty to the vampire nation. Jared Nomac takes the number 6 spot on today's list, and he actually has quite a tragic story. He was the product of genetic engineering of the vampire species in order to eradicate all of the weaknesses and therefore create a better version of the vampire for future generations. Unfortunately for Jared, he was cursed from the moment he was created. His body's genetics were so advanced that it required more energy and sustenance than Jared could consume, slowly killing him from the inside out. He was destined to die. His entire existence was forced upon him, and in revenge against his estranged father Eli Damascanos, Jared set upon infecting as many vampires and humans as possible, knowing that should he be successful, he would wipe out the entire vampire race. Next up, we have Barnabas Collins coming in at number 5. Barnabas, who was the face of the hit 70s TV show and the 2012 movie fronted by Johnny Depp. He was the heir to the Collins fortune, including the booming fishing business. Upon rejecting the romantic advances of Angelique, a witch, unbeknownst to Barnabas, she used her power to curse him, transforming him into a vampire against his will, purely for not returning her love. Barnabas endured a lot of physical changes, protruding ears, elongating fingers, and an overwhelming thirst for blood. Even after Angelique's death, Barnabas remained a vampire, highlighting just how powerful the spell she used truly was. Jumping over to Twilight for number 4 with Rosalie Hale. Now, Rosalie is a vampire who openly states how against she is at the creation of new vampires, something she highlighted to Bella when it came to the possibility of the latter becoming a vampire. Rosalie was once a happily engaged woman who, sadly, was one night viciously abused by her drunken fiancé and his friends. The attack left Rosalie upon the brink of death, and Carlisle smelt her blood from several blocks away. Knowing she would die unless he acted, Carlisle chose to turn her into a vampire. Although grateful for giving her a new life, Rosalie resents her vampire life, being denied a peaceful existence and, most importantly, the ability to have children. Rosalie states she would never wish the life she currently has on anyone, despite her love for her partner Emmett and the Cullen family. Elena Gilbert comes in at number 3, and let me state again, guys, there is no ranking on this list before anyone wonders, why is Elena so high? Elena was stoutly against ever becoming a vampire. It was the last thing she wanted, pretty much her worst nightmare. She wanted a normal life and wanted to be married, wanted to have kids, and wanted to thrive in her planned career as a doctor. However, when Elena and Matt were about to cross Wickery Bridge in season 3, original vampire Rebecca appeared out of nowhere, which resulted in the entire car crashing off the bridge. Elena insists that Matt be saved first by Stefan, while she eventually drowns. This would have been Elena's final moments until it was revealed that upon her stay in the hospital earlier that day, Elena was given vampire blood by a doctor in order to heal a cerebral hemorrhage, meaning she died with vampire blood in her system. When she awoke, Elena was now a vampire. Next up, we have Blade coming in at number 2, who actually goes far beyond being forced to become a vampire. He was born a vampire. He never even had the choice to be human. His mother was pregnant and willingly became a vampire when she was turned by Deacon Frost, which resulted in Blade becoming the vampire with all the strengths and none of the weaknesses. Blade's mother even abandoned him and joined Deacon, completely rejecting her son. Blade, however, was still vulnerable to the thirst, which was kept at bay with the creation of his serum. Despite being born into a world of constant war between vampires and humans, and himself in between, Blade embraces who he is and shows no resentment towards the fate he was given. In at number 1, we have one of the most famous vampires of all time, Lestat de Leoncourt. And if you've ever seen the film adaptation of Interview with the Vampire, starring Tom Cruise, you'll hear Lestat use the term, "the choice I never had," before bestowing the dark gift of vampirism. Basically, you can die or become a vampire. That's your choice, by the way. But Lestat never wanted to become a vampire. He never sought out immortality. It was forced upon him by his creator, Magnus. Following Lestat for weeks, Magnus abducted him from his bedroom and imprisoned him in his home. He forced Lestat to drink his blood, completing the latter's transition. Magnus never mentored Lestat or gave him any advice or help. He left everything he owned to him, including his fortune, and then Magnus ended his life, leaving Lestat completely alone. Lestat never let go of how he was robbed of his human life, citing he should have been allowed the choice to die. There you have it, everyone. That is my list of 10 humans who were forced to become vampires against their will. Make sure to check out some of my other videos by clicking the cards on screen.